Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd do a July wrap-up video. I didn't think I've done a wrap-up, like a monthly wrap-up video before, but I just thought I'd try it out. I think read 3 books this July. That's pretty good for me. Most I tend to read in a month is about 4. If I'm off at all, if I have a length of time off, probably I'd get to more like 5 or 6, but no, I don't think I've read too much more than that in a month. But yeah, July was quite good, enjoyable read month. But also before I get into the books, July was also my wedding anniversary month, and nice, kind of serendipitously, it's also the same. Our wedding anniversary is also the same day that we officially adopted our Jindo pup boy. And so to celebrate, my wife amazingly she embroidered matching patches for these hats we just bought. And so I just want to show you this because it's possibly the greatest gift I've ever received. But yeah, look. That's my boy, the doggy, on my hat. So usually wear this when I'm out walking him. Yeah, it's quite a nice fit hand too. But yeah, so wear that out walking him. It's quite funny. But yeah, it's like the best gift I've received in a long time, I think, at least. So, but yeah, right chuffed with that. But anyway, I should get on with the books. Just in no particular order, really. I read Mordecai Richler's The Street. Richler is an English Quebec author who's also Jewish. That's why it's the Jews out thing there. It's just a series of kind of vignettes and stories of his childhood in Montreal, kind of growing up around kind of during the war and slightly after. Discusses some about being Jewish, some about being an Anglophone in Montreal, mainly about being poor and being son of Jewish immigrants as well too. There's some great stories in it. There's little fun moments where the boys go visit the segregated beach. It's purely for the kind of like the white, I guess Catholic maybe, versus Protestant, kind of the white Christian Montrealers, and has a sign that's Gentiles only beach, and then they stay overnight and they steal it and they take it to their beach and they cross out Gentiles and put Litvacs. So it's stories like that. There's some heartbreakers too. There's a story of one of the people who comes to board with them. They decide to they need an extra little bit of money, so they have a spare room. And they want to have a boarder, but as I said, they couldn't just put out a for rent sign. They deliberately took in someone from Europe, basically like just a kind of Jewish refugee. But then this one guy who's he's basically very quiet, very proper. He's always like admonishing Mordecai and trying to get him to behave properly, and essentially he's just trying to bring his wife and child over, his son, and he's like saving up. He gets word that they're coming, so he's like buying them loads of stuff for that house and getting really excited, and then suddenly one day Mordecai's father comes home with a newspaper and is just like very hushed to his wife. It's kind of like, is that the name of the boat? And sadly there was the boat with the guy's wife and son. There was an accident, something happened, and the boat sank and everyone drowned, and yeah, it was quite sad. And then shortly after he moves out, and they don't think they hear from him again. Or maybe, I think Mordecai maybe stays in the street one time, but yeah, it's quite sad. But mostly uplifting, mostly quite fun, and kind of goes into a little bit about what it's like to have grown up on that particular street in that particular time frame in Montreal. And I have a ton more of Mordecai Richler's fiction novels. This is kind of like, it's non-fiction, but I think it's also fiction. It's probably like quite true, but maybe more like has the kind of fiction writer's elaborateness to it. I think it's really easily readable. It's I don't know what the kind of mass appeal of this is if you're not Canadian or you don't live in Canada, but it's I mean, if you like reading about people's childhoods, I guess it's quite readable. Easy, quick, fun read. It's under 150 pages. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And yeah, like I said, I've got to check out his fiction. Got a ton there. The other thing I read, terrible covers. Titan really dropped the ball with these covers. But I bought 24 of the Matt Helm series, 24 out of 27. And so the price was right. I got a discount from my local bookstore too, because I bought so many. So yeah, just the Wrecking Crew, second in the Matt Helm series. This time he has gone off to Sweden, which I don't know if you can tell, but that's kind of like a Swedish looking road with the sniper rifle. It's the same silhouette, and it's the same terrible, well, not the same, it's a different terrible, like, crappy picture of a woman there. And then they just changed the backdrop. I quite like the backdrop change, but these, I don't know, they try to make it look like a Tom Clancy novel or something. I don't know. Real bad. But the novels are fantastic. If you like, if you're kind of into hard-boiled detective fiction, but you also kind of like a little bit of a spy thriller too, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. It's more, I think it's probably more hard-boiled. It has the first-person narration and the kind of cynicism, and maybe also just kind of philosophical in the way that only hard-boiled writers can get philosophical. Just kind of thoughts and stuff, and kind of explains his job and his outlook on life and stuff, I guess. What I like about the Matt Helm character though is, so he was in a special shadow kind of government. I say spy organization, but essentially they were hitmen. And I don't know if it's in this book or the next one. No, I think it's the next one. Basically said if they were gangsters, they would be called, I guess they would call hitmen. Or, no, enforcers. If they were gangsters, they would call enforcers. But I guess, because they work for the government, the removers is probably the best word to describe them. And essentially, each book he has a target, he has to find target, and then he has to what they call touch the target, which is basically just kill the target. And so there isn't really any, the intrigue is more it's like the reveal of the target, and sometimes like the real sometimes it's just like finding out who's on his side and not. And often there's always a few females in it that he potentially is going to hook up with, and yeah, and then there's a target that he eventually kills, but there's always like these other characters who he has to try to figure out if they're a friend or foe. But what's nice, so he originally did that in the war, and then he couldn't talk about it, but then after the war he met a wife, married, became a an author of very graphic, violently graphic Western novels, and a lot of people didn't really know where he got the inspiration from these violent Western novels, because basically he kind of just told everybody that he was a bit of a paper pusher in the law, because he wasn't allowed to talk about what he did at all. And so then in the first book is just kind of him, which is called Death of a Citizen. It's just basically him getting back, being like, he sees someone from that organization from the past, and he's just basically drawn back into it after 15 years. And what I like about it is more that he is fallible. He is kind of a bit schlubby. He isn't at the peak of his. I mean, he's my age. He's like 36. He isn't at the peak of his. He isn't at the peak of his physical fitness. He's definitely getting older, and but the reason he got drawn back, the reason they wanted him back is those kind of qualities actually make it a little bit easier for him to lay low. Kind of people are like underestimate him a little bit, even if they know even if they know that he's definitely is a remover. They still kind of underestimate a little bit, and it's also like his mind. It's just his mind. As you said, it's not an easy job. It's not he thought he could have a family. He thought he could have a wife and kids. But in the end, he was just kind of fooling himself. This is who he is, and yeah, so I guess it makes me kind of a bit more real about that. I mean, they're very of the time. They're from the 60s. I don't know what the later ones will be like, but it definitely comes with all the problematicness of its era, but doesn't always really bother me, because when I read a book, I want it to be more I like it to be reflective of the times and to be real, and I definitely don't like when certain time periods are looked back on quite favorably, when really I feel like sometimes the 50s and 60s are looked back with way too much nostalgia, and people back in those days, everybody was nice to their neighbours and there was much more respect. It's like, no, man, not really. There was huge rampant racism that was like overt. Yeah, huge racism now, but it's not quite as overt as it was back then. Is that necessarily a good thing or bad thing? I don't know, but I don't know. There's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of attitudes that were problematic, and I don't really want to act like they're not. So it's fine for that. They were very specific. These are very specific novels for very specific people. If you like anything that's kind of hardboiled and spy, you probably love these. If not, you probably won't. And then finally, Ask the Dusk. I read this because I was watching Greg had supposedly found a bookshelf tour, and he has this book, hasn't read it yet though, but he said he had it because one of his customers, when he worked at Borders, said this was their favorite book of all time. And I've read this book and previously really enjoyed it, but I know that I read it when I was probably about 25, and I won't say all of it, but some parts of it really resonated with me as a mid-20s, but I was really curious as to how I would see it now, and it's definitely a book that, as a single mid-20s, it's definitely a book that's much more simpatico with that era of my life than it is now as a married 36-year-old. There's still some stuff like about it. It basically follows Arturo Bandini, who is kind of a stand-in for John Fante, really. And he's just moved to LA. I mean, I think he's been there for at least a few months, but it kind of just describes him just moving to LA from Colorado. He's had like one book published in a literary magazine that he's kind of like dining out on, even though it happened, I think, before he moved to LA, but he's basically trying to make it as a writer. He's very cocksure and egotistical on the one hand, but then very hard and insecure on him, very hard on himself and insecure. Kind of flips between the two. He's very passionate. He lets on that he has, as an Italian American, he has been called a lot of derogatory names and has been excluded from certain aspects of society, but he doesn't use it as any kind of victimhood. Actually, a lot of the story concerns his relationship with a waitress called Camilla, who is roughly the same age. He's about 20 and she's roughly the same age, and kind of just them being a little bit shitty to each other. And he definitely, she's Mexican American, and he kind of uses that against her to call her derogatory names as well. But it's kind of one of those when you have all these like feelings, especially in your early 20s, you're sometimes quite confusing, and you see yourself in a certain way, and you kind of often lash out at the people who actually care about the most. And so yeah, there are some times when in private he's like, I love her so much, and then when he sees her, he's calling her derogatory names. What's interesting is they both have this kind of sense of they're Americans, and they get very touchy if someone calls them. She got very touchy when he called her Mexican. She's like, no, I'm American. And he kind of gets, he feels very American. He doesn't really describe himself as an Italian American. He sometimes will talk about his Italianness, but he very much sees himself as an American. I think in this briefly mentions his Catholicism. I think his previous book before this is much more kind of goes into his upbringing as a Catholic. But yeah, this is more just with him being a writer, and it's very similar to Noah Hansen's The Hunger, if you know that book. And this was very influential for Bukowski. He loved John Fante. I think he even wrote that Fante kind of saved him when he was in reading out of the library, the LA library. Other than like Dostoevsky and a few other kind of writers like that, he said most of the books in the library bored him, and one day he discovered Fante and was just like changed. It was just like, yes, this is writing. So it's kind of in that same sense too. It's just more I don't know. It's a little bit different from Bukowski though. It's definitely much more similar to the No Hansen. But it was still very enjoyable. It's just I wouldn't never call this my favorite book of all time, and I don't think I would call John Fante my favorite author. It's an interesting read though. I think he's quite the character's quite unlikable. I don't know how many people like. I don't mind reading unlikable characters, but yeah, if I read this as a 36-year-old for the first time, not sure what I would feel about this. It definitely, part of it is remembering where I was, who I was when I first read it, and who I am now. And surprisingly, I remember a lot about this book. And actually, I think this is the second John Fante book I've reread recently. And I have wait until Spring Bandini, which is the book before this, which I might reread. But what I actually really want to reread, and that I don't have of his, which I think it was the first book I read of John Fante's, and I also think it's probably his best book. It's called Brotherhood of the Grape. I think he wrote it in the late 70s, and I think at that time his health was starting to fail. If I remember, I think John Fante died in 1983, and by that time he complications from diabetes, and I think he was blind, and basically just he was still writing, but he was just dictating to his wife. But it's the Brotherhood of Grape it concerns kind of really goes into the father-son relationship. And I think it's one of the better father-son relationship books I've read. But I need to reread that again. But yeah, that's my July wrap up. It's not quite as quick as I thought it would be. But yeah, it was As the Dust by John Fante, The Wrecking Crew by Donald Hamilton, that's part of the Matt Helm series, and The Street by Mordecai Richler. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you liked the wrap up. If not, is it enough books? I don't know. But yeah, that's basically what happened in July. So yeah, see you all soon. Bye.